Welcome to Working for Women, the Independent Women's Forum podcast, where we are changing the conversation about women and public policy for the better.
Hello, I'm Hadley Heath Manning, Director of Policy at Independent Women's Forum, and your host for today's Working for Women podcast. I'm here with Patrice Lee Onwuka, who's a Senior Policy Analyst at IWF, and we're going to be chatting about the economy. The GDP figures were just released showing that growth has slowed to 3.5% in quarter three. That's slower than our previous quarter. So I wanted to check in with Patrice, ask her a few questions about how things are going in the American economy right now. What are some good things, bright spots, and what are some areas for concern? So thanks, Patrice, for joining us. And of course, thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in.
Terrific. Happy to be here.
So let's talk about the bright spots first. I like to start with a glass half full. What's going well in the American economy? I mean, are we better off, or are there things that we have to be happy about right now?
Absolutely. I think right now when we look at how the economy is performing and what that means for everyday Americans, they are seeing low unemployment, slowly wages are rising. You're seeing optimism strongly within business community, but also among consumers. So last week, we found out that the gross domestic product, which is, the value or the total sum of all of the goods and services that are produced within our nation, we had a growth rate of 3.5%. That's really good growth. Now, it's slightly down from the previous quarters, which I believe was about 4.2%, but still pretty strong. And we still are. The economy is still performing its best in back-to-back quarters for the past 4 years. So, we are seeing strong growth. The economy is strong, and that translates due to a couple of different areas. Number one, you've got a healthy job market. I mean, we have unemployment at 3.7%. That is so low. Economists call that full employment, meaning everyone who really wants a job can probably find one. I think that because we have low unemployment, people have jobs, they are working. They also have tax cuts. They're able to keep more of their paychecks, and that means they can go out and spend. And that is great for our economy because that's what's driving such strong economic growth right now.
Well, and speaking of spending, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're coming up on one of the best spending times of the year, and that is the holiday season. I mean, maybe this week people are spending a lot of money on Halloween candy, but I think we're going to see people spending more on gifts, and certainly retailers will be looking to do some seasonal hiring, extra help for the holidays. I'm sure Amazon and other, people who do shipping of packages will be looking for extra drivers and delivery personnel, just because people like to spend a lot around the holiday season. So that's encouraging that's even yet to come in the end of 2018. But I also want to ask you about the glass half empty. What are some areas for concern in our economy right now? I mean, what would people say who are being critical of how things are going? What would they point to? What metrics might give us pause?
Sure. So, and Hadley, you're absolutely right that we are going into the holiday shopping season, and I'm pretty sure the fourth quarter of the year will see pretty strong growth again, perhaps even stronger than last quarter. But where are those soft areas? Well, the housing market is one of the biggest soft areas in our economy right now. Investments in housing fell about 4%. And it's been the third straight quarter where you're seeing a decline in housing investments. What that means is that you're not, home builders not building as many houses. That means that you have fewer houses on the market. And that's going to mean that, of course, the prices of houses are rising. Now, if you're a homeowner, it's great to have the value of your home increase. But if you're a buyer, that means you're going to be paying more, obviously. And if you can't afford to do that, you're going to hold off. And so I think you've seen a slowing of the number of houses sold as a result. And then let's bring in another actor here, and that is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has been pretty, consistent in how they are raising rates by interest rates by about a quarter of a percentage every quarter. So, or 0.25% every quarter. And that makes it more expensive for Americans to borrow money to purchase their homes. That is having an impact on the housing market. A second area that I think is a soft area or an area of concern is really in trade. So we saw that U.S. exports is another area where they're lower than usual. And that it has in part to do with the trade disputes we're having with China and some other countries. Right now, the Trump administration has implemented steel and aluminum tariffs as a way to kind of correct the trade imbalances in our nation for those two industries. Well, producers here in this country, small business owners, corporations that use steel and aluminum as inputs into the products they produce, they're starting to feel that trade tariff. And so as a result, they're passing on higher prices to consumers. So as these tariffs start to have a bigger impact, a more widespread impact across the economy, I think that's also going to be an area where growth could be slowed down. And so, when you look at trade, when you look at policies in general, you've got great policies on one hand, cutting taxes, deregulation, that has really spurred businesses to hire more folks, to give out bonuses, to allow taxpayers to keep more of their money so that they can spend. But when you have other policies like, tariffs, which we understand is being used as a tool for trade renegotiations, but at the same time, it can have a negative impact on consumers and the prices that producers sell their goods at. So it's kind of that pull and push that's going on right now in the economy because of different policies.
Yeah, here's an interesting tidbit of information. You mentioned the housing market, and anybody who lives in an urban area can appreciate that. I live in Denver, and earlier this year, one of the big news stories was that the average price of a home in Denver had surpassed $500,000. That's the average home price in Denver. Inventory is always very low. It's very tight. It's very hard if you're buying in. I happen to be a homeowner, so I'm not too upset about it. But it's exactly how you described. And with interest rates being what they are and increasing, it's a tough time if you're trying to buy a house because, of course, you want to take advantage of the lowest interest rate possible before rates go up again. But if there's not a home on the market that you can afford, then that's a tough thing to do. Oh, and I also want to mention another area of policy, just to chime in about this, because we are seeing headlines right now. Healthcare, of course, a very important economic concern for a lot of people. The administration just announced that at least for consumers who buy on the Federal Exchange, the premiums are actually going to decrease this year for the first time in many, many years. And the average premium is going to go down 1.5%. Now, in the bigger context of health insurance costs, there's a lot of people buying on the exchanges who have seen 20 and 30% increases for the past several years running in terms of their insurance costs. And so they're going to kind of scoff at this 1.5% decrease in price and say, well, now that my premium has more than doubled over the last few years, it's not the relief that they're looking for. But certainly, we can point to some of the deregulatory efforts from the administration. I know they're working around the edges of a bigger policy problem that they can't address without some congressional action. But I do applaud the administration for trying to make health insurance something more affordable, because like a mortgage, that's a monthly cost that's very serious for a lot of American families. So I want to ask specifically, it wouldn't be a good Working for Women podcast if we didn't talk about how women are doing in this economy. Anything specific that women might be particularly interested in, economic headlines or news right now?
Absolutely. I think two areas. Number one, obviously, unemployment being so low. It's at a 65-year low, of 3.6%. So in the past 65 years, we have not seen as many women who are employed as we are today. That's fabulous. And of course, that means for the 40% of American households where women are the sole breadwinners, this means that a woman can find a job or move to a different higher paying job to be able to take care of her family. And then the second piece, which is really fascinating, is the fast growth of women-owned businesses. I mean, we are seeing, something like 1,800 new businesses were created each day, Hadley, between 2017 and 2018. So that's saying that women are confident about their ability to start their own businesses and see them grow in this economy. And that has to do with policies. That has to do with both corporate and small business tax cuts, but also deregulation. And so I think those are really strong, bright spots for women today, because it means not only can you find a job, but you can create your own job and then be able to hire people.
Yeah, working for women, indeed. It sounds like there's a lot of working women and women who are hiring other women. So it sounds like it's a good time in the economy for both women and men. Maybe we'll make this the last question, sort of the kicker, looking forward to an event that's coming in the next couple of weeks, and that is midterm elections. How is this economy going to play into this? Because I could see how, on one hand, if you're a Republican or if you're President Trump, you got to be feeling pretty good about the, sunny outlook for our economy. And you got to be thinking about how the policies that he's put into place are a part of that. You got to be feeling pretty good. It never hurts an incumbent if the economy is doing well, certainly. Then on the other hand, when any issue is looking up or something positive going on, I don't think that elicits the same response as something really negative, right? So I wonder if it's something that people are really thinking about, as they're heading to the polls. What do you think?
Well, I think you have to split it up into two here. So you're looking at the top of the ticket, so to speak, like the Senate races. I think the national economy plays a huge role in how people are viewing the senators, and potentially even members of the House members or House representatives. But at the local level, people are also going to consider, how is their financial situation different, and how have local policies also impacted that? So when we look at the, generic ballot polling, that's generally whenever you hear about, who's up and who's down in the polls, that is referring to how people could potentially, or voters could potentially vote. And it changes every week. But generally, the top issues that are motivating women voters, female voters, as well as all voters, number one right now is healthcare. And so I'm glad you brought that up, Hadley, earlier. Number two, it's the economy. And then number three, Social Security, interestingly. So, I think it depends on how well conservatives or progressive liberals are able to message on either of those issues. Immigration is also another issue that's really important for men. I think I won't make any predictions on who's going to win and who's going to keep what the House or the Senate, but I think it's important that as conservatives are pushing a message about the strong growth of this economy, the impact on the day-to-day lives, you have to remind folks of what that means for you. That means that you are, because of the policies that have been implemented under the Trump administration with a Republican Congress, you're able to keep more of your earnings. We've seen changes in the tax code that support education, spending, individuals, families, investing in homeschooling, investing in their children's education. So there have been great benefits that I think are important to remember. And then at the local level, what needs to change so that you also don't see your tax dollars, going out of the window because local and state taxes are too high. So I think keeping those in the back of your mind are going to be important. And of course, when it comes to midterm elections, local politics do matter. And so what's going on in your local school elections or your local communities, what those issues are going to be. I do think, though, that there's nothing wrong with reminding Americans that their financial position is stronger, not because we have Washington-heavy, top-down tax and spend policies, but actually bottom-up policies that allow people to keep more of their earnings because they're the better stewards of their resources, and certainly anybody in Washington.
Yeah, it reminds me of a 1984 Reagan commercial called Morning in America, a very popular political ad, but the ad says something like, because of President Reagan, our country is prouder, stronger, and better. Why would we ever want to return to where we were less than 4 short years ago? So I guess people in every election for a long time have sort of been looking at the economy and asking themselves, am I better off? And I think that's what a lot of voters will be doing going into midterms. So thank you so much, Patrice, for your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's always nice to chat with you and check in and sort of look at how things are going for both women and men in our economy. It's certainly a very interesting time, and I'm sure folks who are interested in the election can check back at IWF.org for our input and our coverage. And this has been another edition of the Working for Women podcast. Patrice Onwuka, a senior policy analyst at IWF, has been our guest. I'm Hadley Heath Manning, director of policy, and we thank you so much for tuning in.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, or stop by IWF.org for similar content.